Have you ever wondered how small daily actions can create a massive impact on your life over time? Maybe the answer to that feeling of being stuck isn't in big changes, but in taking small, consistent steps. What if I told you that overcoming the fear of falling behind is much closer than you think? Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like time is slipping away, like it's running against you? Or maybe you've had that nagging feeling that you should have accomplished so much more by now. If you answered yes, the good news is that you don't have to live with that pressure forever. In today's video, I'm going to show you how simple practices like journaling and focusing on small wins can help turn that anxiety into a real sense of progress and control. Let me ask you something. Seriously. Do you think there's a certain age where you're supposed to have life all figured out? Like, should you have it all sorted in your 20s, 30s, or maybe by the time you hit 40? We're constantly bombarded by this idea that by the time we're 30, we should have it all together. A lot of that pressure comes from older generations. Our parents, grandparents, they lived in a time when life was more about survival than fulfillment. And, well, it kind of made sense back then. Life expectancy was shorter, so there was this intense focus on security. But nowadays, that thinking doesn't really match up with how the world works. I know a lot of you might be stressing about time, feeling like you're somehow behind in life. Maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and you're thinking, I haven't hit those milestones I thought I would. Or you're just putting off projects, or you feel completely overwhelmed by the goals you've set. Don't worry, you're not alone in feeling stuck. In this video, we're going to break down why we feel this way, and, more importantly, how we can shake that feeling of being stuck. Ever heard of something called chronophobia? It's a Greek word meaning fear of time passing. And let's be real, most of us have felt that at some point. This fear pops up when we're stuck chasing quick wins or instant gratification. It's like our brain tricks us into believing we can do everything in one day. But in reality, we're not seeing the bigger picture. We end up overloading our days with tasks, constantly stuck in thoughts about the past or future, and missing out on being fully present, even when we're with friends. It's a trap, and it leaves us feeling paralyzed. The irony? If we focused on small, steady actions, we could actually make a lot of progress, even in a single day. This leads us to a concept from neuroscience: small wins. These little victories activate the brain's dopamine system, specifically through something called the mesocortical circuit. This pathway is tied to motivation, self-discipline, and willpower. And here's where it gets interesting. Instead of obsessing over the future while trying to enjoy your day-to-day life, you can block out specific times to focus on planning. When you're fully present during these planning sessions, you free yourself from that nagging feeling of, what if I fail, or am I doing enough? The same goes for pessimistic thoughts. It's all about carving out time intentionally for these moments. Before we dive deeper, I want to mention that I've left a list of 4 incredible books in the description below that I think will really help with your personal development journey. These are resources that dive even further into the topics we're discussing today, like overcoming anxiety, building better habits, and focusing on small, consistent actions. So if you're looking to take what we talk about here to the next level, make sure to check them out. One tool that can help shift your mindset is journaling. Yeah, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but there's science behind it. Writing down your fears, worries, or even just those worst-case scenarios can actually help you process emotions in a way that stops them from hijacking your thoughts all the time. We tend to repeat our traumas because, in a weird way, they feel familiar, almost comfortable. It's like we think if we keep playing out the same patterns, we'll heal. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work that way. If we don't make an active effort to break the cycle, we just keep reliving the same stories. That's why setting aside time to journal and reflect on those emotional wounds is so important. Now let's talk future goals. Setting realistic goals and creating intentional time blocks to think about the long term is crucial. It could be 3 months from now, 6 months, or even 10 years. If you're always focused on the short term, you're chasing that quick dopamine hit, wanting instant results without putting in the groundwork. This mindset tricks us into thinking we can cram everything into a single day, but it leaves us feeling frustrated when we don't see real progress. By ignoring long-term thinking, we totally underestimate the power of small, consistent habits. Our brains are wired for survival, and they want us to focus on immediate threats, which is why it's so easy to get caught up in the short-term chase for success, relationships, or validation. So to wrap things up, if we can embrace the idea of small wins and shift our focus from instant gratification to long-term growth, we can start rewiring our brains for a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Journaling and setting intentional time for planning can help us break those negative patterns and start building a future that aligns with who we truly are and what we genuinely want. And hey, don't stress if you feel behind. Remember, in Buddhism, the present moment is all we truly have. Take it one small step at a time, and trust that with patience and practice, you'll get exactly where you're meant to be. Let me ask you again, when do you think you're supposed to have it all figured out? In your 20s, 30s, maybe even later? Honestly, there's no magical age where everything just clicks into place. But still, so many of us walk around with this nagging feeling that we're behind. Why is that? One big reason is that we're way too focused on outcomes. We get caught in this loop of chasing that next dopamine hit. We try to fit everything into a single day. Working, studying, catching a movie, hanging out with friends, and when we don't get it all done, there's that drop in dopamine. We feel drained, unmotivated. It's a cycle that pulls us away from long-term fulfillment and throws us into this endless pursuit of instant gratification. But here's the thing. When you keep promises to yourself, what some neuroscientists call certainty blocks or blocks of C, you actually create a sense of accomplishment. Every small promise kept gives you a longer, more steady release of dopamine, working through the brain's mesocortical circuit, the part that helps with willpower and self-control. Little by little, these small wins reinforce your positive habits and strengthen your willpower. When it comes to dealing with chronophobia, that fear of the future, one solid strategy is to break things down into manageable tasks, things you know you can accomplish. When you finish them, you get that dopamine boost at the end of the day. For me, I try to dedicate a couple of hours every day to deep, focused work. But if that doesn't happen, I lean on certainty blocks, like physical movement. Maybe it's just a walk, maybe a bit of exercise. The point is, I'm anchoring my sense of accomplishment to things I can control, focusing on what's internal, not external. A lot of this feeling of being behind, it comes from comparing ourselves to others. Especially with social media, it's a huge trap. We scroll, see other people's highlight reels, and think we're somehow falling short. But the truth is, this idea of being behind is just an illusion. It's a pessimistic thought pattern that pulls us away from the process and keeps us fixated on the end result. It's that fixation that stops us from staying present and enjoying the journey. And the present? That's what we're really missing out on. So how do we move past this fear of the future and those feelings of inadequacy? It's about creating these certainty blocks, specific, achievable goals you can check off each day. These small steps not only build new habits, but they also trigger dopamine in parts of the brain tied to habit formation, like the basal ganglia and nigrostriatal circuit. It's why certain things like writing a script or working on a project have become second nature to me. I've trained my brain to focus on the process, not the end result. Now, this idea of small wins isn't just a feel-good concept. It's backed by neuroscience. We tend to forget how much consistent small actions can add up over time. It's like the compound effect. If you improve by just 1% each day, you end up 37 times better after a year. Seriously, 1.01 to the power of 365 equals 37. It's a wild thought, but it's true. Yet, so often, we overlook the power of these tiny habits. So how do we start building them? First, shift your mindset away from the results and focus on the process. That's why certainty blocks matter. You know what you need to do each day, and as you tick off those tasks, you build momentum. That frustration we feel from trying to squeeze too much into one day, it's because we're chasing cheap dopamine hits, thinking we can solve all of life's problems in one go. But that's not how time works. We get anxious because our brains are wired for survival, constantly seeking quick solutions. And when we don't regulate that, we lose control over our dopamine system, making it harder to stop those pessimistic thoughts from taking over. Sometimes we start things with this huge burst of energy, like a dopamine rush, and dive into a bunch of tasks all at once, only to crash and lose motivation. This up and down cycle, it's common, especially for people who struggle with mood swings or even conditions like bipolar disorder. One minute you're on top of the world, the next you're saying, "I've lost myself." So, what do we do about the past? All those lingering frustrations, regrets, traumas, whether caused by others or our own actions, they can weigh us down. But here's the key. You don't need to dwell on the past all day long. Instead, set aside dedicated time to process those emotions, just like you would for planning your future. By giving yourself specific time blocks to reflect on those wounds, you can work through them without letting them dominate your present. It's about balancing that emotional weight in a healthy way so it doesn't interfere with your ability to move forward. In the end, it's all about focusing on what you can control. Those small, consistent actions that compound over time. Keep showing up, keep ticking off those tasks, and trust that you're building something real, even if it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And remember, just like in Buddhism, it's the process of staying present, day by day, that truly leads to fulfillment. Let me share something with you. One of the most effective practices that really helped me at the start was journaling. Yep, just keeping a simple daily journal. I'd spend time writing about past experiences that were still bothering me, stuff that weighed on my mind. And believe me, there's a lot of solid evidence that shows this practice can be a game changer. Not only can it help reduce stress, but it can even boost your immune system. Crazy, right? You see, stress and anxiety activate specific circuits in the brain, like the hypothalamus, which controls the release of cortisol, that pesky stress hormone. If this keeps happening over and over, it triggers a whole chain reaction in the body, making the adrenal glands pump out even more cortisol. And after a while, this constant state of stress can weaken your immune system, leaving you more vulnerable to getting sick. When I first started journaling, I didn't have what neuroscientists call emotional granularity. It's a fancy way of saying I couldn't really pinpoint or label my emotions clearly, kind of like looking at a blurry photo and trying to make sense of it. Emotional granularity is the ability to break down your feelings, like identifying every grain of sand in a pile. It's all about self-awareness, but it takes time to get there. Journaling, though, it's a great way to start developing that skill. By writing down what's bugging you, you can begin to see patterns, and slowly but surely, you start recognizing the shape and texture of your emotions. As I kept up with this practice, things evolved. These days, I mix it up with something called NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. It's kind of like lying down and reflecting on your emotions, but the trick is, you're not just zoning out or meditating to relax, you're really engaging with what you feel. It's a bit like yoga nidra, where you lay still, close your eyes, and shut off all the sensory input around you. We live in a world filled with non-stop distractions, sights, sounds, constant sensory overload, and that pulls us away from actually processing how we feel. What happens when you take time to relax and process emotions is actually pretty cool. It raises your dopamine levels, but not in the quick-hit way. Over time, you start focusing more on the process rather than chasing those immediate rewards. You feel calmer, less stressed, and you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for rest and relaxation. And guess what? It's great for your immune system too. By observing your emotions, naming them, giving them a color, or just feeling where they sit in your body, you get a clearer perspective. You realize you're not your emotions. You're the one watching them unfold. This kind of reflection strengthens the brain's optimism circuits, keeping the default mode network, the one tied to anxiety, worst-case scenarios, and rumination, from running the show. That network can be useful in moments of real danger, but it's not something we want running 24/7. We want it ready for emergencies, not for minor day-to-day stuff. When you regularly process your emotions, you keep those circuits from taking over your mental landscape. Now, I know deep sleep is another natural way to process emotions. But let's face it, with all the stress and anxiety that comes with modern life, many people struggle to get that solid, restful sleep. And if you're dealing with chronic stress, it's even harder. The goal isn't to eliminate negative thoughts or worries completely. It's more about not letting them control you. That's why it's so important to carve out time to reflect on the past and process unresolved feelings. Most of us don't do that enough, and those emotional weights just keep piling up. Just as important as reflecting on the past is planning for the future. I'm a big fan of art therapy, especially when it involves setting aside 15 minutes to write about everything that's gone wrong, and then shifting focus to what you're aiming for in the future. It's a great way to process those emotions and also get a clear sense of direction. The key is to structure your day around certainty blocks. Those small, achievable tasks that build momentum and give you a sense of accomplishment. Over time, you might find that you don't even need to write everything down anymore. You'll have a deeper sense of what you need to get done and how you're feeling emotionally. Every now and then, old negative emotions might pop up. When that happens, I just try to observe what's going on inside me. Whether it's anger, fear, frustration, I let myself feel it and then let it go. Most of the time, when someone hurts us, it's because they're acting out of their own pain or lack of awareness. They're projecting their issues onto us. Getting mad about it only hurts us in the long run, not them. So, when it comes to dealing with chronophobia, that fear of time slipping by, or feelings of regret and not being enough, the best approach is to set aside specific time to reflect on both the past and the future. Focus your energy on the process, not the outcome. Anchor your dopamine response to things you can control, your internal values, your goals, rather than external achievements. By shifting from external validation to internal growth, you start to experience the power of small wins, consistently building over time. We tend to overestimate what we can do in a day, but massively underestimate what we can accomplish in 3 months, 6 months, or even a year. Long-term thinking, combined with focusing on the process instead of the results, brings a deeper sense of satisfaction and happiness. I hope these insights help you find some focus and reduce that anxiety. Stay patient and take it one small step at a time. You've got this. As we wrap up, remember that it's all about those small, consistent steps. Whether it's through journaling, practicing NSDR, or simply focusing on small wins, you have the power to shift your mindset from anxiety to progress. By staying present and focusing on the process, you'll see real growth over time. And it's incredible how much you can achieve when you stop chasing instant results and start embracing the journey. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you found this video helpful, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And hey, if you know someone who might benefit from these insights, share this video with them. Let's keep spreading this positive energy.